Hello everyone, it's just me here today to send you an in-between message from session 4. So forgive me if I miss some of the things that we said, because usually Hermione and I check in those things together. It was an absolutely lovely session last time. It's nearly 2 weeks ago now. I can't believe it. It's been living in my mind ever since, with little echoes of the things we talked about coming up to the surface again and again through this time. So I hope that's been the same for you as well. We'd like to think that this project is a sort of a touchstone for the time that you spend in between as well, whether you fill that with artistic projects of your own like Steve's, or like the fantastic collages that Michael made, or like the journal that you, Geraldine and Chris, made with your watercolours and your map tracking the process of your Beck over the course of the last couple of years. There's been some really beautiful creative work going on. Some of it we do in the moment of the sessions, and some of it happens in the space between. We talked a lot about the space between this week, space between people and the space between one thing and another thing in different ways. We started off, we had Lucy as our guest musician last time, and it was an absolute joy to welcome her. She is a singer and a sort of multi strange sound maker with her orophone, which sounds a little like a trumpet but in a kind of high and wispy way. Anyway, I don't want to give away too much, because when you hear it you'll be amazed at the beautiful sounds. We started off the session with Lucy singing for us something that she'd made, a beautiful, wistful piece that drew us into the kind of liminal space, that's what they call it in research, the space between in the night time, when other people are asleep. She drew us into the intimate sort of connection between a mother and a sleepy child in those nighttime hours. It seemed, the time there seems so strange and untethered from all the ordinary stuff that happens either side of it in the days. You can listen to the piece. Lucy called it Half Truths. We're sending the link again so you can have a look at that. You can see us when she sings it to us, and I left it on the gallery view so we could see that. You can see us getting drawn into that, just gradually losing ourselves, surrendering to that time in our own ways, to that musical time that she made with the piece. It's really beautiful, and it prompted some incredible conversation, prompted us to share some thoughts that we might not otherwise have mentioned about aloneness and loneliness, whether those two things are different and how they are, about how each person's story through their life, however closely loved they are, is always an individual thing, and how it's possible to be lonely as a cloud, we said, even in crowded spaces, or even when you're very closely in conversation with somebody else. I had an image of Bubbles. I don't know if you remember, early in the year, it was way back in the autumn, Rehab joined us, and she made an improvisation on the oud that was called Biography of a Bubble, and I had the picture, she used a picture to share with us about that, and I had that in our mind, about those fragile little perfect spheres that might float alongside somebody else without touching, and be complete and perfectly beautiful in themselves. I really loved the conversation we had together. Thank you for being so open to exploring such deep and personal thoughts together. What a privilege it is to be able to share those ideas together, to spend that time considering and creating, at least I hope you find that too, a place where we can bring each other just enough solidarity to help bear those lonely moments that life is full of. We drew on the rich feelings there to explore some different ways, following I like to kind of consider, you know, how when you have a thought process and you try to track what thought came after what thought, see if I can piece together the way the session developed in the actual way that it did. I'm sure I'm not right, and I can't check in with Hermione to see what she recalled this week, because we just couldn't make a time to record this together. But I've got that we thought about loneliness. I think, Leslie, it was you that mentioned it was Loneliness Awareness Week that week. I think it connected to the work Michael was doing with the university in Sheffield about living with dementia as a single person or on your own. And that linked to the photographs that you had shared, Michael, of a really brilliant sort of huge public art installation in Sheffield. I think there's quite a lot. There was a project about having poetry outside on walls in Sheffield that required you to go and stand near them in order to be able to read it. And Michael shared a poem called What If? Really lovely poem that is, about labyrinths of air and how you might be coming up from the station in Sheffield. It's such a specific geography, that city, starting with the station in the valley and then the town kind of climbing up the sides. So that poem was by Andrew Motion, and we had a look at that and had a read of it. Lucy and I improvised with it, and the electronics that Lucy was using with her keyboard and the sampler gave us some amazing possibilities for collaboration that were new on this project. So that was exciting as well. I've got some notes here written down for in case I forgot what I was going to say. Michael produced a harmonica, which was an unexpected thing. I think it just popped into your mind, Michael, that while you were in Sheffield on Tuesday, you had bought a harmonica there. So you went and fished it out and played it. And Leslie was absolutely delighted to see that as soon as he heard the sound, Mike was singing along. And there's a beautiful video that I saved where Michael has played a piece especially for you, Mike. So you can have a look at that too if you'd like to watch it again. I sent a couple of links to other songs as well because I know Mike is a Beatles man, and that some of those Beatles songs have that very particular harmonica sound on the beginning. So I sent you those as well, although I'm sure you're very familiar with them, Mike and Leslie. We collaborated further on Steve's project, which is happening sort of inside and outside, with Steve characteristically directing us all into the joint effort. So now that project is coming along. Now it has Michael reading Steve's poems. I did love how you talked, Steve, about the fact that you didn't really write the poems, but they kind of, they wrote themselves through you. I love that idea. I think that links with our theme, doesn't it, about making space and time and the kind of quality that that space actually does have, that everybody interprets in maybe in slightly different ways. So we've got drawing on your experience beyond the frozen path. That was a photograph that Chris and Geraldine had shared in the spring, and that John Samuel had spoken about the path weaving up through the landscape into the distance and then up into the clouds. And I think Steve's project was born there, somewhere there in the space between and beyond. So now we've got Michael reading those poems. I hope we'll be able to share what we've got so far of that project on Friday, Steve. I hope it will be to your liking. I hope I've done what you were hoping for. So we also summed up our impressions at the end. We collaborated on a joint piece, a sort of improvisation where we all shared our impressions. Because I tend, when we're in the session, to have my notebook at hand, and I try and jot down a couple of things that will help me to remember something that happens so fully and absorbs all my mind at the time that we're in the session together. That makes it very hard to remember what happened afterwards. So I usually try and write down the occasional jottings of things that stood out, to help me trace like a dot to dot through the session later. And so I usually end up with the occasional word or a small idea, and Lucy has sent her impressions of what she had written down, those individual words. And in fact, we shared our in-between message last week as an impressions of the previous session. So this time, in the last session, we wanted to bring you into that process as well, to see which ideas float upwards from the session and stay in your mind, and send you off into the day carrying those with you. So we made an improvisation, and it starts with the space between, that moment before a performance happens. Lots of people spoke about that most beautifully. Geraldine, you were so articulate about that process of changing the atmosphere when a musician is about to perform. And Steve described, and I must put this in because both Marid and Esther and Anwen from the spring, I'm sure, will be delighted to hear what you said about the harp and the process of that space between, before playing for a harpist being such a tender moment of care, and then lowering the harp onto the shoulder like a baby, and then the hush falling over an audience ready to hear the playing. So that was beautiful. That space figured in our improvisation. You can hear what we made of that, everybody chipping in quite freely. I noticed that we managed to do that really, really tenderly, so we create space for each other to speak if we want to, and to chip in some of our ideas. I hope that's how you experience things. It's certainly how I experience things, and it's one of the real joys of this Out of the Ordinary project. So there was also in there, and I can't remember whereabouts in the journey of the session this happened, but there were also some animal creature friends that featured in there as well. So there was Jackie the fox, who has appeared and made herself quite at home at Lucy's place. There's a beautiful photograph. I don't know if you've had a look at the photographs lately, but have a look. There's Jackie reclining on the table, waiting for somebody to come and have tea with her. And also Lucy had shared for you, Louise, since we spoke about ponds at the beginning of this project, a lovely tiny little video. It was quite difficult to see because it was very small in the screen, I know. But there was a sort of a little floating, like a lily pad leaf, or maybe it looked a little bit like a mushroom, some people thought, and with a newt on the top. And then there was a tiny little tender moment of meeting, but where a little shadowy one swims up from the cool depths of the ponds and just sort of nuzzles the one at the top. So there was that as well, a little whimsical thing that found its way into our session as well. So on Friday, it will be the last session of this series. We'll see you there on the 30th. And we've got some ideas about having a couple of sessions that will a cup of tea session and maybe a feedback conversation, which of course that could involve some tea as well. I'm sure it will do. Maybe you'll be wanting to bring your red and white spotty mugs and teapots to that. We love to have your ideas about how it's going, and it helps keep us true to making sure that it really has the quality that we all value about this project. So those sessions will tide us over before the new dates in the autumn, and we are looking forward to that, to the ongoing exploration, which is such a privilege and a pleasure to do with you. So we will see you on Friday, and look forward to all that is going to come. We'll wrap up our conversations about making time and space and look forward to something new. Bye for now.